that we could do better. The notion of lean comes from this stuff. A lot of the habits that we've employed are bad habits. Some of the technology that we employ doesn't always help. And so lean construction, lean design comes in and says, there are ways to address these issues in our industry. Imagine if you could take and eradicate some of these things. Imagine if that's 1%, 5% of the construction marketplace, 10%. It's $95 billion just here in the United States. Those numbers are probably low if we really can get into it. We've got a couple of great speakers today that I'll introduce to you to dig in and unpack this notion of lean construction and design a little bit. Rebecca Bettler is the National Director of Lean Construction at J.E. Dunn. Her job is to act as a mentor and a coach for J.E. Dunn employees, including management and partners, to deploy lean strategies throughout their enterprise. Prior to J.E. Dunn, she worked as a consultant with architects, owners, contractors, teaching them strategies like production planning, similar lean practices that help them to improve the work that they do. Tom Feliz, he's a recent addition to our Autodesk team. His career, similarly storied, specifically leveraging technology and how technology can affect benefiting construction. He's worked as a job site coach for numerous projects, working with integrated design teams, and really working ultimately, at the end of the day, the goal is to improve your schedule, enhance your quality, and reduce cost. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the stage over to these two and get at it.
Audience real quick. So as we get started, we're going to ask the group a couple of questions. And maybe John can help me out with some of these because these are his questions. I want to ask the room, who here is in a project setting on a day-to-day basis, just by a show of hands? Okay, and who here is more like operational support on a day-to-day basis? Okay, so we've got pretty much an even mix. What are some of the things that you've heard about lean or lean construction? Who wants to throw something out there? Maybe John can run over with the
Nobody's heard
microphone.
anything about lean construction. It's pull system. Okay, great. Eliminate waste and rework. Good. Toyota Way.
Toyota Way.
Perfect.
Provide customer value.
Provide customer value. Excellent. Anybody anything else? Anybody here that it's expensive? Anybody here that it's hard to get buy-in? Anybody here that you're kind of drinking the Kool-Aid? So there's two sides to the discussion, but ultimately the concepts that we're talking about are very true. If we can get to a point where we're all working together to reduce waste and to just be more efficient with what we do, be more collaborative about it. Anybody been involved in a lean project? Anybody's endeavors? Anybody's companies actively pursuing lean deployment?
Wow.
Anybody actually serve as a lean champion or a change agent? Couple of hands.
We know who we're going to call on a little bit later.
Exactly.
Great.
All right, fantastic.
And real quickly, and I'm Tom Feliz, by the way. Thanks for showing up, Dave.
This is where.
So those who've worked on the project team, who works more in design versus like actually in construction? Like, so who's like architect, engineer, consultant, and then who works like for a general contractor? Okay, so a lot of GCs, I guess, in the crowd. That's good to know. So thanks.
And just real quick, any owners or municipalities, owners reps, anybody? Okay, so a few hands there too. Good cross section.
Great. So as we heard when we just asked this group, right, who's heard about lean, we had a whole bunch of different answers come out there about what lean is, right? Before we get into really the summary of what lean is at its very basics, we're going to go over a couple of things that are misconceptions, frankly, in the industry about what lean is. We want to just be clear and set the stage about what lean is not. Lean in and of itself is not just eliminating waste, right? Cutting off the fat, getting rid of the waste in the process. It's not equal to pull planning. We will talk about pull planning today, but pull planning is a part of one of the tools that supports a lean project or a lean organization, but alone in and of itself doesn't make a project lean. It's not a single process. There are a lot of different processes that you'll use in a lean company or a lean project, but it's not equal to any process in and of itself. This is my favorite. It's not an acronym. If you're writing it in all capital letters, you're just yelling, so please don't do that. It's not a set of tools. There are a lot of tools that we'll use in a lean project, but it's not equal to just the set of tools, and it certainly is not an easy button. Lean is something that takes dedication, takes hard work, it takes rigorous application. As a friend of ours likes to say, it's rigorous application of common sense on a regular basis. When times get tough, especially because our tendency is to go back to how we have done things in the past, how we know how to do it, what's made us successful before. So what lean really is a philosophy and overarching culture. It's the idea that through continuously improving and respecting our people, we can drive ever-increasing value to our customers while eliminating waste. So that's a very, very basic definition. We talked about, do we get into the lean principles in this session or not? There are, as many of you know, a lot of different lean principles that support the idea of lean. This is something that kind of just captures the all-around general, embodies the spirit of what lean really is.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. So I'm sure you guys have seen this slide before about this idea of the interaction between process, people, and technology. And our perception is that these three parts, integrate equally together. The reality is, when you're really trying to create innovation and change, because I fundamentally believe that the construction industry is broken. I'm going to show you some stats on why I think that, and that we need to start radically thinking about a different way we deliver our projects on a daily basis, and because there's just so much room for improvement, as John mentioned. And this is where we perceive the interaction taking place. And we are at a technology conference. Autodesk is sponsoring this. So there's a lot of tools that are used and are put in place to accelerate that change and that innovation. But the reality is that gotta go this way. Okay. The reality is that technology really is just the catalyst. And the really difficult part I'm sure you've seen in all of your organization is to get that fundamental system replaced and way of thinking placed, and the people to buy in to this new collaborative way of doing work. And we'll talk a little bit about how it's different. But really, when you guys go back to your organizations and you go back to your project teams, the interactions that you have on a daily basis with those team members are really going to affect the sustainable change that's going to help create this movement. And technology's in place, and there's a lot of great tools out there, and Carl was talking in the keynote about some interesting concepts of how we create that more collaborative nature, but I just wanted to start off with that point. And just to illustrate that point of how technology can really help leverage a project team to be collaborative and successful, this is a project team down in Temecula, California. It's a joint venture between DPR and Turner Construction. I don't know, has anyone heard about this project? A few people. Okay, well, for those of you that haven't, it was a $150 million integrated project delivery, IPD. Does anyone know what IPD is? Good sense? No one's heard of it? If you haven't heard of it, they used what they called an integrated form of agreement. So all that is, and I won't get into the detail of it, it's just the concept of all the trades coming together, not just the architect, owner, and contractor, but even the trade contractors participating in a shared contract where they share in the profit and the risk on the job, so they have a skin in the game. That's essentially what an integrated form of agreement is. And so this project was an IFOA, and it actually was delivered 40% under other projects. Per bed, it was $1.1 million per bed in California with OSHPD and other regulatory agencies. That's actually 40% cheaper than the average bed cost to build a hospital. And they were able to realize their full profit and also share in some additional profit through the saving in contingency. And so the big thing I want to point out in this picture, like everyone's sitting down and they're all looking at a digital production plan on the board using a smart board. So they're obviously using technology. But a couple things I wanted to point out is that the person who's leading this job is actually the guy right here in the back of the room sitting down. That's Tom McGreedy. He's one of the superintendents of DPR construction, and he really understands this idea of servant leadership, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. But the way he's leading this job versus maybe a traditional construction project where you have a superintendent at the front of the room going through the 3-week look ahead and barking orders and saying, hey, did you get this done? Hey, why wasn't this delivered on time? Why didn't you get your crew here? He is more taking a back seat, allowing the other members, and Rebecca's going to talk about these planners and who they are and who they're made up of, really allowing them to take control of their own work and taking the power to the edge. And what I mean by that is they're planning their own work, they're standing, they're delivering on their commitments, they're holding each other accountable. And it really is this leadership that's dedicated to these principles that we're going to talk about, but also a disciplined approach. Day in and day out, this is the way that this project team delivered this project. And they built a sense of trust over the entire project. And we'll talk about that more as well. But a very successful lean case study that leveraged technology and was able to allow for this collaborative environment where trust was really built. So because this is an introduction to lean, one of the learning objectives is to talk about some of these basic concepts, and someone already mentioned it before, this idea of waste, right? Driving waste out of the project. And someone also mentioned the Toyota production system. Well, Taiichi Ohno, the quote-unquote founder of lean and the Toyota production system, I guess actually he came to the US and saw how things were done in US projects in the 20s in the Ford assembly line. He took these concepts back to form what he called the 7 deadly wastes, or the 7 wastes. We've since then added an 8th waste, which is the underutilized talent or people within your organization. But I'll walk through some examples and maybe poll you guys on if you've seen any types of these wastes on your construction projects. Before I do that, I wanted to, and some of you have already seen this figure, but it's supposed to show how our industry, the construction, AEC industry, has progressed over the last 50, 60 years. And the sad fact is, and this is why I say that it's broken, is that while other industries like manufacturing have been able to leverage tools and their people to really increase productivity over the last 60 years, the construction industry has staggered, stayed the same, actually gotten worse. And so, it's broken at every level, the owner, contractor, architect, and that's why I say we need to have a fundamentally different way that we're delivering our projects, because obviously the current system is not working. And John pointed out, we have $1 trillion in construction being delivered in the United States, and if we can just eliminate 10% of waste, these are not small numbers. In fact, studies have shown that 58% of time on a construction site is actually considered waste. That's waste of rework, which is a staggering number, unnecessary movement, and the average material handling on a job site when some ductwork is, for example, delivered to a job site, it's moved 7 times, an average of 7 times before it actually gets installed. Just imagine all that waste put in place, where instead you could have a just-in-time delivery system and install it right when it's needed in the right amount with the right number of resources. So, if we can just take a small chunk out of this number of waste, we're looking at a lot of savings, and especially in our industry where profit margins are already razor thin. Hopefully this gets the blood moving a little bit and gets people to get up and think about different ways to deliver their projects. So that's what we're here to talk about. So real quickly, I wanted to go through some examples of waste on construction site, and maybe you guys can think about some examples that you've seen, but some examples, for example, of overproduction. You maybe have a drywaller coming in and putting up the entire metal stud drywall system, and then the electrician has to come back and cut holes because he didn't get his work in, right? So he didn't properly sequence the work. And that example, it's not because these people don't want to do a good job. And every day we don't come in, we're like, hey, let's figure out ways to waste time and money of our owner. We're in a fundamentally dysfunctional system, and we're incentivized to protect our own piece of the pie. We're not incentivized to help each other, and it's just the way the adversarial relationship of traditional construction has come about over the last 40 years. Another example is waiting, not only workers waiting for work, but work waiting for workers. And Rebecca is going to talk a little bit about reliability and predictable workflow and why that's so important in Lean. You have the example of inventory or stuff being delivered to the site. One of my personal worst waste, and the one that drives me crazy, and I know it drives the trade contractors crazy, because I work with foremen every day, and they're really proud of the work that they put in. I mean, they're craftsmen that have been doing this for 10, 20 years. They're the real experts in what they do. And having them come in and tear out something because it wasn't properly detailed or they didn't have the right information when they were installing it, that type of waste just drives me crazy. So I'm sure that you guys all have your own examples of waste on your projects, but that's just a quick run through of what I'm talking about on waste on a job site. And this also applies in design as well. So putting together sets of drawings, whether that's a 3D coordinated model or it's a 2D set of drawings, you have this over-processing, I call it, where you're modeling down to the screw. Is that really necessary? Let's model what's important and is a value to the people that are going to do the work. Can I get a quick poll of the audience? I noticed the titles of a lot of people were like BIM and VDC. Just real quick, who's involved in the VDC or BIM department of your, makes sense, because this is a technology conference. So I wanted to actually draw some parallels between BIM and Lean. In fact, a lot of people say that BIM was one of the first Lean tools in construction. And for those of you who are interested, I can distribute, there's a person out of the University of Israel who's done a lot of work on this. His name's Raphael Sachs. And he's actually wrote a number of papers on the interrelationship between BIM and Lean. And you can Google him, or you can come up afterwards and I can get your business card and I'll send you some links. But he has actually a matrix that he's formed. There's like 56 different relationship points, and I've just highlighted a few of them here. BIM and Lean, even though they're very interrelated, they actually don't, you can have a project that's BIM, that's not Lean, and vice versa, right? But when used together, they really provide an ever-increasing value, as Rebecca mentioned, to owners and other players on the job site. And I'll walk through those. So one of the main goals of Lean is really to reduce variability and increase reliable workflow. And really a model that's well built can be used to actually deliver in construction and have people create a reliable plan that's then actually put in place and performed. And in the same way, we're really seeking for smaller batch sizes. This idea of single piece flow, not operating in large batches where you're just coming in and doing a lot of work and then handing it off. The model actually allows teams to look at a phase of construction and coordinate in detail that phase. It's just another tool to enable, like I said, the technology to help become the catalyst. And in a way, we'll talk about pull planning later, Rebecca will. It enables that as well. Well, visual management is one of the main principles of Lean. Making everything visual to everybody involved in the project so that it can be understood very easily, and I call it the 30-second challenge. You're making the project, a lot of Lean projects will have dashboards. They'll come up and you'll see on a wall, some metrics and deliverables, and in the same way, the BIM model allows teams to visualize what they're going to actually put in place. So there's a lot of overlap there, as well as this idea of continuous improvement. And Carl mentioned in the keynote, and some other speakers have mentioned at this conference that you may have seen, this idea of moving to now a more collaborative environment. And some of the tools out there are definitely encouraging people simultaneously working, whether that's in the model or on their construction sites, leveraging the cloud to plan their work and really have this be real time. And so, I don't want to downplay technology. It's a very important part. And the BIM model can allow that collaborative nature to continue and really flourish on job sites if used, in the proper system with the right leadership and direction. So I'm not going to go through all of these, and I just wanted to kind of flash this up on the screen because what Rebecca's going to go into is the last planner system. That was the other part of this learning objective today, was to go through a methodology, a lean methodology. But I just wanted to let you know that there are a lot of lean tools out there, and a lot of concepts, and this is actually only a fraction of them. So, an example of laser surveying, you may have seen those TopCon devices out there and what BIM 360 layout is doing as far as taking points in the model and being able to lay them out in the field with incredible accuracy and the time savings there. I mean, that's a lean tool. When you do this root cause analysis where you're getting, they call it the 5 whys, you ask why 5 times to get to the real root cause, that is a lean exercise that I know Rebecca does on her job sites all the time. I mentioned earlier the integrated form of agreement. That's a contractual system set up to actually encourage collaboration because everyone's profit and risk is in a shared pool. So again, come up to me afterwards. I've got business cards. I'm more than happy to go through a lot of these. We're not going to hit on all of them. We will talk a little bit about prefabrication, but and obviously Rebecca's going to go through a long explanation of the last planner system. Well, long relatively, right? It's 30 minutes. I mean, she teaches
Thanks for selling it.
full day courses on this. Like it's a really great framework for creating a lean project and methodology. But Rebecca mentioned earlier this idea of continuous improvement, and I just wanted to go through. I just wanted to go through this planning cycle. Who's heard of PDCA or PDSA before? Or it's called the Deming cycle. Or actually, Deming credits Short, believe it or not. So he calls it the Short cycle. But this idea of planning your work. You say you're going to do something. You put together a plan. You go out. You actually perform the work. You come back. You see, okay, what worked, what didn't work. You study it. You then adjust the plan and then continuously improve onto the next step. So real quickly, what are some examples maybe of you on your project teams doing this sort of continuous learning? Do you have any? Ralph, I know you're a big... Ralph came from one of the largest lean integrated jobs in San Francisco at Cathedral Hill. And so they're in design for a while. They're finally in construction. Do you have a...
Well, there's a simple example. Like I come oftentimes in the morning making coffee, and I was really upset like that the process took me so long because all the stuff was like dislocated all over the kitchen.
Yeah.
So I rearranged the whole thing, and I reduced probably the making the coffee for, I don't know, 50% of the time. And so this was continuous improvement.
Yeah, and that actually, Ralph makes a good point. There's this great speaker out there. If you guys ever have time to Google or YouTube, this guy, his name's Paul Akers. And I mean, the guy is one of the most dynamic, I mean, he bleeds lean. This guy is a fanatic. And he has this small company in Washington called FastCap. And he'll talk to you about like lean is actually simple. And he has this idea of, hey, just fix what bugs you, right? Go out there every day and on an individual, and he has thousands of YouTube videos that he just says, hey, take a small improvement on your job or what you're doing with your work, like Ralph just mentioned with the coffee, and take an iPhone video of it. And he's coached a number of different companies, but one of them is a glazing contractor he started working with last year named Walters & Wolf out of California. And in the first year that they started doing this lean is simple, fix what bugs you, they produced something like 3,000 videos. And it started all the way up from their CEO, who's good friends with Paul. And it's just, you guys should just Google him when you have a chance. He's really got some interesting things to say about lean and this idea of not making large improvements, but these incremental small improvements actually add up to a big change. And if you can go back to your companies and the people in your organizations and get this kind of way of thinking and culture kind of ingrained on waking up every morning, because really everybody in his 50-person company comes to work and they think this way. And it's pretty amazing. So if you can get that culture on your job site, then it only will build momentum off of each other. What did I just do? Uh-oh. I just clicked that button.
I did that once too. I'm not sure how to try it again.
Click it. Uh-oh.
There you go. Just put it back on.
Okay. There we go. If I can get it back up. Okay.
Don't do that again.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Getting excited, talking about lean. Not as excited as Paul Akers, though. All right, so the other concept that Rebecca mentioned is this idea of respect for people. And the reason why I say that continuous improvement and respect for people are kind of the foundations of lean is because, these guys in the field who are, coming in, day out, doing the work, doing what we call in the lean world value-added work, right? So they're the ones that, because the owner doesn't care, if you spend all this time coordinating and putting together details. And no offense, because a lot of people in this room are doing a lot of these activities that are supporting.
That was me, sorry.
Oh, that are supporting this value-added work of the guys in the field. And those guys are the real experts, right? Those are the guys that I think it'll come on after this. Those are the guys that are delivering what the owner writes: a finished building, a roadway, a sewer system. And so really our role as management, because I think most of the people in the room are not actually wearing, belts, I'm assuming, right? That our role is really a servant leadership role. And this concept of servant leadership is you're turning that paradigm of the traditional, manager, team, and then workers below. You're turning that upside down, and you're actually supporting those guys in the field, right? So you're enabling them to get the right set of drawings, the right tools, the right labor in place so that they can do their job without any constraints and do it perfectly. And they'll make mistakes, but if you can enable them to give them the right tools, people, processes, and the system to really allow them to speak up, because a lot of these guys, believe it or not, have some of the best ideas on the job site. And Toyota uses this A3 system. So an A3 is just a one-page, 11 by 17 piece of paper where they submit ideas for improvement, right? And they get most of their A3s from the guys that are actually on the production floor. They'll do this thing where they call pulling the andon cord. They'll stop the production line, which is like, GM and Ford was like unheard of. You got to keep uptime and all this. They would stop the production line if they saw an error or a potential, because they don't want to have that rework or that error actually be put through the entire process. And they have systems in place to actually error-proof. So they really, and what I'm trying to say is, when we're on construction sites, we need to really tap in and leverage the knowledge of these foremen and superintendents that have been in the industry for 10 plus years, are experts in what they do, and really and have those ideas come from all places. Wow, I hit the wrong button again. Are you serious? I'm not obviously continuously improving.
I switched the remote so we can continuously.
Yeah.
Can you hit the button?
This is
again?
obviously an error. What do I do?
Just do whatever you did the last time to get back up. Talk about the research
Okay.
findings, and I'll.
All right, Rebecca's going to get the slides up, and we'll get along our way here.
Yeah.
Should I just use this one instead?
Just talk to it. And
Okay. So Rebecca's going to bring up a slide.
Where'd it go?
Sorry. The Max. Yeah.
Yes, and use that one instead.
Okay. Does this one work now?
That one should be much better.
Okay. Yep. This one. Less buttons. See, an example of making it simple. Continuous improvement, right? All right. So I want to poll the audience real quick. And David, you can't answer this question because I know you know the answer. So there was a study done in the early 90s by these two gentlemen, Glenn Ballard and Greg Howe, quote-unquote founders of lean construction. Greg works, well, he's kind of retired now. He lives in Idaho. But Glenn works out of Berkeley as a professor there. And he worked for Bechtel for like 20 years before that, so he came from the industry. And they've known each other for a long time, but they started looking at why is construction productivity staggering so much? They started with a lot of time motion studies and productivity studies. And in the early 90s, they actually did a study where they visited 175 job sites. And every Friday they would come, they would ask the guys, the foremen, the superintendents, the guys in the field, okay, what did you guys get done last week? And what are you planning to complete the following week, right? And they wrote down all those activities and tasks. And then they would come back the next week and ask them the same exact question. So real quickly, for people that don't know the answer to this, what percentage do you think they said they were going to get complete that they actually completed the following week? What do you think that percentage is? 20%. That's 30. Half. 50%. 60%. Okay, you guys are in the range. So they actually found, and by the way, let me preface this too. The average foreman were 15 years experience. These jobs were actually considered well-run, successful jobs that had no visible problems. So these are not like problem projects, right? These are the average, successful with a really experienced superintendent manning the crews. They got done 54% of the work that they planned to get complete. So it's not like they were not doing work, right? They were just not doing the work that they planned for, right? They had fires that come up, there'd be a design change, something wouldn't work, rework, and they would only get done about half. So, Gren and Glenn were like kind of scratching their heads like, that's pretty pitiful. Like, we need to build a system to actually encourage this disciplined approach to get what Rebecca's going to talk about as predictable workflow on a job site. And so this study in the early 90s really set up kind of the methodology that Rebecca's going to cover now in the next 20, 30 minutes about the last planner system.
So the study was actually, when they started this study, the reason they did it is there was this notion in the industry that, well, our foremen don't know how to plan. So they went out and they were focusing on what is it that our foremen are doing and how are they planning, and they realized that they actually can plan. They were planning a bunch of work, and they were planning work that they thought was going to be ready for them, but what they found is the work then wasn't ready to actually do as it was. There were either predecessor work not getting done on time, or there were outside constraints like Tom alluded to. So over a series of different iterations, they wound up creating something called the last planner system. Before we talk about the system itself and what it looks like, the title of it is very specific on purpose. Initially, they were going to call it the foreman's planning system, because they said in order to do this effectively, you've got to have the foreman, those people who are doing that work, planning it in the morning, day to day, they have to be the ones involved in the planning. And then they realized that sometimes it's not always a foreman. Sometimes it might be a superintendent, sometimes it's a crew leader. So they eventually went to the term last planner, because it is that last person who actually plans the work who's involved in doing this. There's really 5 main components to it, and there's a lot of organizations that implement these in all different ways. They have slight tweaks to them all. In fact, within J. Dunn, we have a lot of different tweaks to the entire system, but we still hit on all of these key pieces. There's first of all, the master schedule, which is just a high-level overview of the project. It really establishes the promise of the project, that we can definitely indeed hit this overall deliverable of the end milestone to that client. And then it does some other things like identifying long lead items and breaking the project down into phases. The next step is pull planning, which is the piece of this that is most commonly used throughout the industry. And this is where you take those milestones and you, with those last planners, plan out the work that's going to be done. And it's the word pull is in there because we are pulling the work at the request of the customer. And you think about this, you think, well, the customer, they want their building when they get it. But within a lean process, you're looking at everybody along that process as an internal customer as well. So we don't install the framing until the framer's customer, the electrician and the plumber, is requesting it. So we do that planning backwards. The next piece here is you take that pull plan that's been planned out and you look ahead, particularly at the next 6 weeks, and you look to identify what are those things that are standing in the way of getting that work done. So we can take that work from work that we should do to work that we are able to do. And we call those things constraints. And we work with teams to get them removed. Then we go into a little bit more detail on a weekly basis with the last planner saying, okay, well, I've got this work in my 6-week look ahead, and next week I'm going to do exactly this. I'm going to finish the framing on the in rooms 4 and 5 on the 3rd floor on Tuesday. And we work with all of the last planners to understand their work as commitments from one person to another, so that you are actually building that system of reliability. Then on a daily basis, they check in with each other and tell each other what got completed and what didn't. And we measure something called the percent plan complete. So if we had 10 items planned for that day and we got 8 of them done, we had 80% plan complete. Now, if you go back to when Tom was talking about plan, do, study, act, or plan, do, check, act, this piece here, master schedule, pull planning, look ahead, weekly planning, that's all the plan part of plan, do, study, act. Then we actually go do the work, and then we check it and we study the results. We check at a daily basis, did we get done or no? And then what is the result? And if we didn't get done, what can we learn so we can improve how we're planning the next time? That's the key piece to continuously improving how we use the last planner system, how we plan our work reliably together. I'm just going to show you some quick examples, and again, there's a lot of different ways to use a lot of these parts and pieces of this. This is one of our teams in North Dakota where they did their master planning. They had the entire J. Dunn team together, a couple of the major trades, their foremen, and also their project managers, and they lined out along the top here, these were the milestones. They just pulled them right from the P6 schedule. Then they sat there and they first of all planned out, when are we going to do the pull plan for that milestone? Let's put that on the calendar. Now let's talk about what all those activities are. Because a milestone, how you define it, can mean something different in different people's minds. A building dry-in, some people might think means that you've got temporary windows in. Other people might think it means you've got windows and 2 rounds of caulk in. So we get clarification on all that and alignment. Then we identify the long lead items and whatever submittals are needed. That enables us to have a big picture view of the overall project. Then we move on to pull planning. We take each one of those milestones in a different session, and again, we work to plan that out together as a team. So this is near the end where we're reviewing it as a big group, but we've got all of these folks in here are last planners or their project managers. And we've actually had our BIM person in the room, we had the owner's rep in the room, and we had one of the architects in the room too, which can be really valuable for helping answer questions, helping remove some of those constraints before they happen. Every trade has their own color sticky note, and when we put them up again, we work backwards based on the request of each customer in the process. Here's the beautiful pull plan when it's done. It doesn't always look this nice. Sometimes it looks a little nicer. Sometimes it looks a little messier. It's all okay. What's important is that the team can understand the connections, and then what happens is it gets put typically back into some type of software. At JDown, we often put it back into P6. Sometimes people will put it into Excel. There are a number of cloud-based solutions out there that you can put that back into to help keep it in a clear, concise manner for folks. The next piece then is make-ready planning, where you take that work from the pull plan, you look at those next 6 weeks, and you spend time with teams identifying, all right, so we planned for the prerequisite work, the inspections and the space when we did the pull plan. Now, maybe if we had the architect or the owner or some of the engineers in there, we might have planned for some of these other things. But now we need to get really clear and make sure we have everything we need to get each task done. And so I know this activity is not happening for 5 or 6 weeks, but is your material here? Do you have your labor lined up? Is there an outstanding submittal we need to resolve? What they found in the industry is that 6 weeks is generally enough time to get those removed, those constraints. What we're used to in traditional construction is we identify some of these issues and concerns on the day we're supposed to do the work. And that leads to the 54% that Tom shared. Now we capture these constraints on a constraint log. Here's just a basic Excel format, and there's a bunch of different things on here you can see. I thought I added a picture. We actually, in some of our projects, we have big whiteboards that have this exact thing just drawn up on the whiteboard. And the key thing within this constraint log, in my opinion, is this constraint champion. Who is going to take ownership to remove this constraint? They might not be the person who's going to actually resolve it, but they'll take ownership to go chase it down and find the owner or get the answers from the architect or the engineer. Again, this piece here is predicated strongly on the understanding that we are working together based on reliable promising. This piece here is also considered by many lean construction pioneers to be the lightning in the bottle, right? You can plan your work out all you want, but if you don't remove the constraints to make the work ready, you're not going to be able to get the work done anyway. And we go from there to the weekly work planning, and this is the point where the last planners are confirming those promises to each other. They're saying, yes, this is exactly what I promised to get done next week. I'll have this part done on Tuesday so that the next trade can come in on Wednesday, and they have conversations with each other about it. Some teams use an Excel form. This is the original way it was done. There's some folks that use sticky notes on walls, and there are some teams that use cloud-based solutions. So again, it's what it comes down to is it's about the conversation and the commitment between the last planners that make this effective. It's not about the paper, the forms, the sticky notes. It's not about any of that. On here, you'll see there's a commitment description. That's where they talk about their activity. Over here, they put what days of the week they're working and how much manpower they're putting on there. At the end of the week, or on the daily basis when we do the stand-up, that's when we fill out, did it get done as we promised? And if not, why? What happened here? And you'll see there's different categories up here that those will fall into, but that's part of the learning piece that we can go do root cause analysis and learn and move forward and not make the same mistakes again. Here's an example of one of our teams. It's actually very interesting. We had 2 teams on the same project. We had 2, like one was a 3rd floor addition and one was a renovation on the 1st floor. So there are 2 different teams. Both teams had probably about 8 to 9 foremen in the groups, and this team did their stand-up on a daily basis on the project site in front of their drawings posted on the wall, standing up. They got through all of these questions, were very effective, got moving within 10 minutes. The other team, led by a different superintendent who was sure his ways of doing things for the last 20 years was the way he wanted to keep doing them, met in the job trailer for their daily stand-up, which was a 10-minute walk away from the project, sitting down around the table, and they discussed these questions and a little bit more, and it took them 45 minutes every single day. And I went out there one time, and I was talking to one of the trades, and I said, how are your daily stand-ups going? And he's, I don't know why we have a 45 meeting minute at the end of every day. It drives me nuts. I said, what are you doing? It's not supposed to be 45 minutes. And I went in and I sat down and I watched their meeting and I said, okay, here's all the things we're doing that are leading to this to happen. But when you get the high energy and you get people standing up and really focusing and being clear on what they're talking about, it makes things move very quickly. Has anyone here got daily stand-ups within their work? I know in agile software development, there's a lot of it. And what's your experience with a daily stand-up?
Actually, that part of your office does have that in the field.
Okay.
So they have one every morning at 7:30.
Right.
But like I said, I'm not really a part of that, so I'm not
Okay.
sure what they really do there.
Okay. How
That's
about you?
on
You had your hand up too? Someone else?
Yeah, so we do daily stand-ups in the field and in our office in certain departments. We've had a lot of success with them. They're usually about 10 minutes long.
They usually are not 10 minutes long?
They're
or
usually about 10 minutes
10
long,
Yeah, and you've got it right, and they're usually very, very effective, and you've got, thank you very much. Any kind of a team working together, when you've got that, you've got to stay in communication about what's happening on a day-to-day basis. I oftentimes refer back to, you know, when you're on the highway and you're driving and someone starts to swerve into your lane, what do? You move out of their way, right? It's that preventing those daily collisions that this daily stand-up will allow to happen. We do this in design, we do it in construction, we do it in departments. There's all different places this can be really valuable. What's important is making sure you know what you're going to talk about, and that adds value. Actually, a lot of our teams also include a quick safety chat. You know, what are the safety concerns for the day to look out for? This turns into then the learning piece. When we're doing that daily stand-up, if something didn't get done, we want to understand why. Now, if you want to learn when someone doesn't accomplish something that they'd promised to do, you have to give them a feeling of safety. And this goes back to when Tom was talking about respect for people. If they feel like they're going to get in trouble, they feel like they're going to get blamed, they feel like they're going to push aside because they didn't accomplish their goal for the day, they're not going to be really open and honest to going into 5 whys and explaining what really led to it so that we can learn from it. So we have to look at all of these variances as learning opportunities. So we want to talk about, first of all, of course, what's the recovery plan? It's a construction project. We've got to keep moving. We can't let that end date slip. But now, how can we prevent this from happening again? Ask why. Why wasn't the material here on time? Well, we didn't get it ordered early enough. Why didn't we get it ordered early enough? Well, we didn't have the approved submittal yet. So we want to dig deep. Why didn't we have that approved? We want to dig deep into the system to find out where in the system we can improve it so that we can prevent that from happening over and over. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have run into a problem more than once before, right? Happens to me all the time. So imagine one of those problems, if you could just stop it from ever coming back again, how great life would be. So if you do that root cause analysis, you can do that. And then we track that percent plan complete. Again, I mentioned if you have 8 out of 10 activities done, you've got 80%. It's a pretty simple mathematical problem. Now this chart here stops at 80 only because it's an Excel form. If we had a number punched in here that said 85, it would go up to 90. You want to aim for 100% of your plan complete all the time. However, it's construction. We don't expect to hit 100% on a regular basis, if at all. If you do hit 100% on a regular basis, usually there's something going on, right? We're not being honest about our planning, or we're not planning aggressively enough, because it is construction, and we can't be expert at knowing it's going to take me exactly 8 hours and 14 minutes to get this done every single time. We want to get closer and closer to that. There's some folks that say, oh, if you hit 80%, you're good. You always want to keep aiming for 100, because that's what continuous improvement's all about. If you aim for 80, you'll stop at 80. You want to aim for 100. So fun little story. Before I came to work for J. Dunn, I was a consultant, and I worked on projects all around the country. And there was this small 10,000 square foot addition, and the superintendent and the project manager from J. Dunn called me up, and they said, you know, the owner on this project said this needs to be a lean project, and we don't really know what that is. Can you come help us? I said, sure. Why don't you give me a little bit of the details? Tell me what's going on. So they're telling me all about this project, and the superintendent says, you know, Rebecca, the owner wants this done in 6 months. And I've been doing this for a long time. I'm really good at what I do. I'm not trying to give myself too much credibility here, but I'm pretty good at this. There's no way we're going to get this done in less than 7.5 months, probably 8. And that's if we have perfect weather. This is in Atlanta in the springtime. There's no way we're going to get it done in 6 months. I said, okay, well, what did you tell the owner? They both said, well, we told him 6 months. Awesome, thanks. I said, I'm not going to make any promises, but we will do what we can to get this going. And what I learned later was that the owner had actually come to them and said, we want this to be a lean project. And they had been through design, so they were about ready to start construction. And he actually said, I want you to sign an integrated form of agreement. And some of the trades offered up to them too. So they were kind of, which there's better ways to do it. Those owners in the room, talk to me, I'll help you out with that. And so they said, okay, we'll do what you're asking. We'll do this as a lean project. And then kind of behind closed doors, they said, yeah, we'll just tell the owner that, but we'll do it how we always did it, because they'll never know the difference. And then the very next meeting that they were in, the owner pulled them aside on break and said, I thought I told you guys I wanted this to be a lean project. And they said, well, it is. And unfortunately for them, or fortunately, the owner knew a little bit better than that, and he said, no, no, no. So that's when they wound up pulling me in. But they did have the integrated form of agreement, but the design was already done. They had trades then that they had bid this work out to, and they said to the trades, hey, you don't have to, but would you like to sign this integrated form of agreement? They wound up actually getting 6 of them to sign on to it, but primarily the tool they used was the last planner system and then continuous improvement. They had a very responsive architect and engineers because of the IFOA, and they did, I will say this, they had perfect weather in Atlanta in the spring. It hasn't happened since. How long do you think it took to finish this project? 5.5 months, any other guesses? They were telling me 6 months was just impossible. They actually got it done in 4.5 months. You know how much overtime? None. You know how many Saturdays? 1, and that was to make up for the 1 day of rain that they had. They got 50% of that contingency was returned back to the owner, and the GC and the 6 subcontractors who had signed on to the IFOA made 186% of what they anticipated making on that project. So again, primarily they use the last planner system. So you can get great results from doing this. The keys to success with the last planner system or any of the tools that you consider lean are the behaviors that follow them and that lead them. We had a superintendent who, when we first started this, very quickly got to the point where he said, I'm going to do whatever I'm told I need to do to make this work. And in the back of his head, he said, and at the end of the project, I'll tell you, haha, I was right. And he didn't get to do that. But now he's on his 3rd project, and he won't do a project without lean. And now he's on a $400 million data center. So this stuff works when you've got the right folks putting their mind into it. So Tom's going to tell you a little bit about some of the other tools that support lean. And again, with any of these tools, you can use them properly, and you can use them with the right behavior, or you can use them improperly with the wrong theory behind it and really screw some things up.
So how many people have used prefabrication on their projects? So real quickly, how do you think prefab is lean? What are some examples from what you've heard about what lean is? Less waste, okay. On-time delivery, okay. Optimized material use and labor, right? Controlled environment. Less movement, yep. Yep. Oh, man, you guys are ready to teach this class. So everything you said are great examples. I mean, when you're in a controlled environment, you're using the right labor to get the work done safer because you're not out trying to coordinate work and trades tripping over each other. You can deliver it onto the job site on time, like someone mentioned, and you're not having maybe the master craftsman doing stuff that a laborer can do. So you're saving money, you're saving time, you're delivering a higher quality project that's better coordinated and safer. And so, I mean, prefabrication is a great lean tool that a lot of companies now are using more and more. And this is just an example of, underground electrical prior to the precast placement, and then when it was actually delivered onto the job site, we're able to just put it in place, surround it with some infrastructure support, and then put into place. Another example from another project is this idea of a prefabricated shared racking system. So this in the same way, this is the mock-up of what they were going to put in place. And really, they called this, on this project, mechanical art, right? Because it was an exposed ceiling system. So the trade contractors, who actually all work together, so you'll see there's electrical engineer, there's plumbing, there's obviously ceiling, there's a mechanical system. They all work together to put it in the same racking system and presented it to the architect, and basically we're able to leverage BIM, again, another tool, to say, hey, this is how this is going to look when we go to install this exposed mechanical art. And I would like to argue that this probably wouldn't have worked without BIM, right? Because the architect really couldn't imagine what they're talking about without this mock-up, right? Which is another lean methodology, continuous improvement. This idea of plan, do, check, act. The reason why people do mock-ups on job sites is to say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. They test it, they put it together, they find the leaks in the system, and they go fix that so that when they go out into the job site, they actually can deliver a lot of repeatable work over and over again, and it's tightly coordinated. So, this is just another example of really teams collaborating together. They would have never thought of this if it wasn't the right, behavior and process put in place to say, hey, we can actually work together to form a racking system where all of our equipment can be put in. And again, that's the whole people process piece that I was talking about. Because in a traditional project, everyone was just throwing their stuff up. It would have looked like a mess. They would have just gone in and got their piece of the pie done. But with this collaborative environment, they will achieve something like this. So I thought that was another great example. Mobile kiosks or digital plan rooms. Again, the ability to leverage technology at the point of construction. So you have people, again, less movement, not going back to the job trailer to coordinate the most recent set of plans. Everything's at their fingertips at the point of construction. So you have people planning, coordinating their work, and obviously leveraging mobile tablets. How many people have actually mobile like iPads or tablets in the field? So being able to leverage technology to have the people in the field anticipate and act on issues as they arrive, and then the ability then to communicate that back to the back office so that they can optimize and clear the path for them and remove those constraints, as Rebecca mentioned. So again, technology playing a huge role in the ability to leverage their ability to work in a more lean way. So coming to the end here, and I know we got a lot of time for questions, so there should be some opportunities if you guys had questions along the way. But I just wanted to do a quick side-by-side comparison of what I'm talking about here, about changing paradigms. And in traditional thought, we have a system or a leadership system that really dictates direction and control. It's this idea of command and control. You will get done what I want you to get done, and really not allowing the people who are involved to really have a say in the process. What you also have is you have planning that's partitioned. And what I mean by that is you have everyone in their own silos, each trade, each discipline working almost on a project team, but kind of protecting their piece of the pie, as I was saying before. And because that's the way they're incented. And so really doesn't allow for our collaboration, and it creates silos. And then you also have a management control or system that's really inflexible and a process that's fixed that doesn't allow for this continuous improvement to take place or this innovation to take place. Now, by comparison, you look at, okay, maybe this is a traditional way construction's always been done. How does that compare to what I'm saying from a lean perspective? How a lean, collaborative, IPD, IFOA project, or even just the culture of a lean. You don't need to have, contractual obligations are always important, and it creates people to have a compelling event to change the way they're doing things. But you can create this without IPD contracts. I've seen it, and I don't know, Rebecca, you've seen this on a number of projects. And it really comes down to the dedicated leadership, right? A leadership that really doesn't dictate, but rather facilitates the discussion, right? In a collaborative direction. So you have a superintendent like Tom McCready standing in the back of the room, allowing the trade foreman to get up there and make commitments and reliable promises to each other and holding each other accountable. And I think that's the major difference between, from a leadership perspective, how a lean project maybe facilitates a discussion versus pointing and telling people what to do. Now, from a planning perspective, it's very collaborative. So again, you're involving everybody who is the subject matter expert in their scope of work, and they're eliminating errors and coordinating their work and determining what is the best path and as the project evolves, and being very flexible. And again, in a management system that really has that culture of accountability and this idea of a network of commitments put in place to deliver a project involving all the key stakeholders in an integrated, proactive, not reacting to problems as they come up, being in this constant firefighting mode, but actually bringing in trades earlier. And that's another concept that we didn't really talk about with IPD, but having trades come earlier in the process, maybe into pre-construction, bringing in the superintendents to look at the design documents that the architect's putting together, saying, hey, this is constructible or this is not constructible, and allowing for this a culture of accountability to really flourish so that you can have that increased predictable workflow. Again, the major metric within a lean job is this idea of PPC, plan percent complete. And all that's doing is just measuring accountability, right? Because once you have predictable workflow, and originally we were going to lead we didn't have enough time, we were going to lead an exercise called the Parade of Trades that really demonstrates this principle of actually going slow actually helps you go fast, and that everybody working together can achieve a safer, higher quality, cheaper, and faster job in the end of the day. It's kind of counterintuitive, but I know when Rebecca, you lead a lot of teams on project sites, they best learn through simulation, and I don't know if you do that one or a similar exercise, but it really hits home with a lot of these foremen, because traditionally they think, I'm just going to come in and blow and go and worry about my piece rate, and they don't realize that by optimizing the whole, they're actually doing better for the project as opposed to just optimizing their own piece, really, because the idea of throughput is really important in a lean system, and in order to optimize throughput, you have to see the system as a whole piece, right? As this idea of a network of commitments that we're all interrelated. So I think that's a big difference from traditional construction. This last slide, and I wanted to end with it, and because echoing what Rebecca said, Jason Bredberry, he's out of Skanska. Oh no, he doesn't work for Skanska anymore. He now works for a solar company, but he's a lean champion. He told me one day, I thought it was really, really simple and well said. He said, lean is just common sense rigorously applied. So all the concepts that we talked about today, it's like, yeah, duh, we want that on our project. But where we fall short is you may have heard some things and you took some notes and snapped some pictures, and you might go back and talk about what you've learned to some of the people at your company. It's like, hey, maybe we should think about doing a lean job. And people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I've seen a presentation, or I've been part of a sticky note planning session. But where the real change is going to take place on our project, in our project organizations and on our teams, is having someone who's a champion of the process, who has a lot of respect on the job site, saying, guys, this is the way, or an owner like Sutter or UHS or Disney, who says, this really works, and they recognize there's a problem in our industry and that it's broken, and you have committed, day in, day out, dedicated leadership and disciplined execution to allow for this type of environment to flourish. And it's not just something you're going to do one day and not do another day. It's really a habit. And so I just wanted to end with that. And I know we have some time here, and I wanted to open it up to...
Before that, I want to add on just a
Sure.
short little story. I was with a bunch of our superintendents, actually 2 days ago, and we were talking about safety. and we were talking about a safety culture and how do you know when you have it. And people were throwing a bunch of things out, and everyone was nodding their heads. And I think one of our superintendents summed it up perfectly at the end. He said, you have a safety culture when someone comes in to work that day and says, you know, I was going to mow my lawn yesterday and I was wearing shorts and I realized, I better put pants on. And that's the same thing with the lean culture and the lean mindset. People ask all the time, hey, how do you know if you're lean? It doesn't matter if you're using any of these tools specifically or not. It's when you go into your kitchen, like Ralph's talking about, and you reorganize things so that it takes you 50% less time to make your coffee.